Ever get back from a trip and feel like you've left your groove somewhere between time zones?
Yeah.
Like your brain's still on island time, but your to-do list is like yelling at you from back home.
It's a feeling most of us know well. That disorientation of adjusting not just to new places, but even back to the familiar.
Right. It's like coming home should be grounding, but sometimes it's just off. So for this deep dive, we're using your notes on thriving in changing environments to tackle how to adapt on the go, A&D, keep that momentum when we're back.
There's a lot more to it than just packing the right adapter plug, that's for sure.
Okay, so the first part of your notes really digs into understanding a new environment. It's not just about like knowing the landmarks, right?
Exactly. Think of it like this. Imagine you're at a dinner party with a completely different set of customs. You wouldn't want to accidentally offend anyone by, say, using the wrong fork or interrupting at the wrong moment.
Oh, like not showing up late for a meeting in Japan because punctuality is a major thing there. Or knowing how bowing fits into the culture.
Those are perfect examples. Those subtle cues, the unspoken rules, those are what can make or break your experience. It's about observing the patterns, understanding expectations that might be totally different from what you're used to.
So how do we become more culturally fluent, so to speak? Do we need a crash course in every place we go?
That's where the idea of building a toolkit for adaptability comes in. It's not about memorizing facts, but having the right mindset, skills, and even resources at your disposal.
A toolkit. I like that. It sounds much less intimidating than trying to be an expert in everything. So what goes in this metaphorical toolkit?
Well, first, your mindset. This means approaching new environments with genuine curiosity and open-mindedness. It's about embracing the beginner's mind and being willing to learn, to maybe even be a little uncomfortable.
That makes sense. You can't really learn if you go in thinking you already know everything.
Exactly. Then you need some key skills. Clear communication is huge no matter where you are, but also time management because things might move at a different pace, and definitely that cultural sensitivity we talked about.
And what about resources? Are we talking Google Translate and travel guides here?
Those are definitely helpful, but think broader. There are online communities for connecting with locals apps for everything from currency conversion to finding the best street food. Even something as basic as a good map can be a powerful tool.
Okay, I'm feeling better equipped already. But here's something that's been on my mind with all this adapting. Is there a risk of losing ourselves a bit, like becoming so flexible that we blend in but lose our own unique shape?
That's a fantastic point, and it leads to the next crucial element. Staying grounded in your core values. No matter where you go or what you're adapting to, those principles should remain constant. Your integrity, your work ethic, the things you truly believe in, they're your anchor in the midst of change.
So it's about finding that balance between being open to new experiences and holding on to what makes us well us.
Precisely. It's like those digital nomads who work remotely while traveling the world. Their location is constantly changing, but they create stability by sticking to routines, maintaining their work ethic, and prioritizing those values that bring a sense of self even in unfamiliar surroundings.
That's a great example. It's not just about where you are, but how you choose to be, regardless of location. Now, for you listening, think about a time you had to adapt to a challenging environment, maybe not even a physical one. What helped you not just survive, but actually thrive?
That idea of staying grounded, it's something we often overlook when we're talking about adapting to change. And it's even more relevant when we think about readjusting after coming home from a trip.
Because you'd think coming home would be easy, right? Like, shouldn't everything just snap back to normal? But I've definitely felt that weird disconnect after being away for a while.
You're not alone. It's called reverse culture shock, and it can catch you off guard. You're back in your familiar environment, but somehow it doesn't quite feel the same. You might feel out of sync, unmotivated, even a little lost.
Reverse culture shock. I've never heard that term before, but it totally makes sense. So what's the antidote? How do we navigate this weird in-between space where we're not quite there anymore, but not fully back here either?
Well, the first thing is to acknowledge it. Give yourself permission to feel a little off-kilter. It's normal, and it will pass. But to speed up the process, there are some things you can do.
Okay, so beyond just waiting it out, what are some proactive steps we can take?
Your notes actually have a really smart suggestion. Start with something practical. Recalibrate your daily routine.
So getting back into the rhythm of things, workouts, meal prep, all that good stuff, I could see how that would help ground you.
Exactly. And you can take it a step further by creating a re-entry plan. Think about the tasks you need to catch up on at work, at home, with your personal goals, and prioritize them. But also be sure to schedule in some self-care. Give yourself time to rest, process the experience, and recharge.
A re-entry plan, like a roadmap for getting back to you. That's brilliant. I've never thought about it that way before.
It can make a huge difference. And speaking of processing the experience, another key point from your notes is the importance of reflection. Take some time to think about what you learned during your trip, the things that surprised you, the challenges you overcame.
So maybe journaling about the trip or having those long conversations with friends where you recount all the stories and adventures.
Those are great ways to process. But your notes specifically suggest something a little more focused. Writing down any new skills you picked up or perspectives you gained, then think about how you can apply them back home, how they can enrich your everyday life.
I love that. It's like bringing a piece of that journey back with you, not just as a souvenir, but as something that continues to shape you. What about you, dear listener? What's one lesson you learned from a past trip that you've brought back into your life? Take a moment to reflect on that. We'll come back to it shortly.
While you're doing that, let's shift gears to the final part of your notes. This one focuses on maintaining momentum, not just after a trip, but in the face of any kind of change.
Because let's be real, life is constantly throwing curveballs, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about adjusting to new places, but to new jobs, new relationships, new chapters in our lives.
Absolutely. And your notes offer some powerful strategies for navigating those shifts and staying on track. The first one is about setting small, actionable goals. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you're facing a big change, so breaking it down into bite-sized steps can make a huge difference.
That makes sense. It's like those huge travel backpacks. They seem impossible to carry until you adjust the straps and distribute the weight evenly.
What a great analogy. And speaking of frameworks, your notes also mention a specific one you might find helpful, the SMART goal system. Have you ever used that?
Oh yeah, SMART goals. They're a classic for a reason. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. It's like a recipe for success no matter what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. And I think it applies beautifully to this idea of maintaining momentum through change. Let's say you're back from a trip and feeling inspired to bring some of that adventure into your everyday life. Instead of saying, I'm going to be more adventurous, which is kind of vague, you could set a SMART goal, like I'm going to try one new restaurant in my city every month. That's specific, measurable, definitely achievable, relevant to your experience, and you've given yourself a time frame.
Okay, that's a really good example. It's taking that abstract feeling and turning it into something concrete and doable. But even with the best goals and plans, there are times when motivation dips. How do we stay connected to that feeling of purpose, that drive to keep moving forward?
That's where the next point from your notes comes in. It's about staying connected to your why. Why are you doing all of this? What are you working towards? What are those core values that we talked about earlier?
It's like remembering the feeling you had when you booked that trip, the excitement, the anticipation, the sense of possibility. How do we bring that energy back into our daily lives?
Sometimes we need visual reminders to keep us inspired. Your notes mention things like vision boards or daily affirmations. These tools can be incredibly powerful in keeping your why front and center.
I love vision boards. Having those images and words that represent your goals and dreams, it's like a daily dose of inspiration.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the visuals, it's about the feeling those visuals evoke. It's about connecting to that deeper sense of purpose.
Absolutely. And while those personal tools are fantastic, there's also something to be said for having external support. Your notes emphasize the importance of accountability and support systems.
Oh, for sure. Having someone to share the journey with, a friend, a mentor, an accountability buddy, it can make all the difference, especially when those inevitable challenges pop up.
Exactly. And thankfully, we live in a time where technology can really support us in this area, too. There are countless productivity apps, online communities, and even virtual coaching programs that can help us stay organized, connected, and motivated.
Okay, so we've got our goals, our support systems, our tech tools. But even with all that, life is still going to happen. There will be setbacks, unexpected detours, moments when we feel like giving up. How do we build that inner resilience to keep going even when it gets tough?
That's where the final point from your notes comes in, and it's perhaps the most important one. Practicing resilience. It's about changing our relationship with challenges, viewing them not as failures, but as opportunities for growth.
That's easier said than done sometimes. How do we actually make that shift from seeing obstacles as roadblocks to seeing them as stepping stones?
It starts with a shift in perspective. Your notes remind us that disruptions are inevitable. They're part of the journey, part of the human experience. Instead of resisting them or letting them derail us, we can choose to see them as chances to learn, adapt, and become even stronger.
So it's that embracing the unexpected, the messy, the imperfect parts of life, and finding the lessons hidden within those moments.
Beautifully said. And that ties back to the overarching theme we've been exploring. Adapting to change is an essential skill for navigating life. It's not just about travel, it's about approaching all of life's transitions, big or small, with that same sense of curiosity, adaptability, and resilience.
I love how everything is coming full circle. It's like we're creating a roadmap for not just surviving change, but actually thriving in the midst of it. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to that question I asked earlier. What's one lesson you've learned from a past trip that you've brought back into your everyday life? Have you had a chance to reflect on that? Hopefully you had some time to think about that. It's always fascinating to see how those travel experiences shape us.
Yeah, definitely. It's those little shifts in perspective that can make a big difference in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive, so maybe we should do a quick recap before we wrap things up.
Sounds good. We started by talking about how to really understand a new environment. It's not just about, like knowing the landmarks and the tourist spots.
Right. It's about those deeper cultural cues. Like, what are the unspoken rules? What are the things you wouldn't think to ask about but could accidentally offend someone if you don't know?
Exactly. And then we talked about building that toolkit for adaptability, having that curious mindset, those essential skills, and even just knowing what resources are out there.
And I love how we talked about coming home, because it's not always the smooth sailing you'd expect.
Right, that reverse culture shock can really throw you for a loop, but having a plan can help.
Yeah, even just something simple like getting back into a routine can make a huge difference.
For sure. And of course, taking the time to reflect on what you've learned. How can you bring those lessons back into your everyday life?
Love that. And then in this last part, we really dug into maintaining momentum, not just after a trip, but in the face of any kind of change life throws our way.
Right, because life is all about change, isn't it? And your notes had some great tips for navigating that, like setting SMART goals.
SMART goals are a classic for a reason. And I think that example you gave about trying a new restaurant every month was perfect.
Yeah.
It's taking that desire to be more adventurous and making it into something concrete and actionable.
Yeah, exactly. And we also talked about the importance of staying connected to your why, remembering what really matters to you.
Because it's easy to lose sight of that in the day-to-day, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And having those visual reminders, those support systems that can help us stay on track.
Absolutely. And I think the last point we talked about was resilience. Because, let's be real, things aren't always going to go according to plan.
Right. There will be bumps in the road. But it's how we respond to those challenges that really matters.
It's about seeing those obstacles as opportunities for growth.
Exactly. And you know what? It all comes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, that feeling of being out of sync after a trip. What if we could apply all these principles to every new experience, even if it's not travel related?
Wow, yeah. What if we could approach every change with that same sense of curiosity and adaptability?
I think that's the key to not just surviving change, but actually thriving in the midst of it.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. So to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until next time, happy exploring, everyone. Go.